Fáilte. My name is Andrew Healy and I'm a lover and drinker of Irish whiskey. I'm on a journey of discovery to learn as much as I can about the great spirit of the Emerald Isle. Along that journey, I'm lucky enough to meet other people who are passionate about Irish whiskey, and the My Favourite Irish podcast is their story and their favourite Irish whiskey. Whether that's their current favourite, their first ever dram, or one that has a special place in their life. On today's episode, I got to spend some time recently with John Cashman, who has the great title of Head of Whiskey at the Powerscourt Distillery in Enniskerry, County Wicklow. And we talked about John, the Powerscourt Distillery, and his current favourite Irish whiskey, Fercullen Falls. Listen along. Fáilte Arash to everybody. Normally we're sitting at a bar, but we're actually sitting here at the boardroom table at Powerscourt Distillery with Head of Whiskey, John Cashman. John, lovely to meet you in person.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thanks for having us here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, and welcome to Powerscourt, and welcome to the Garden of Wicklow.
Yes, indeed, and you're a proud Wicklow man.
I'm born and bred. I'm born and bred here from County Wicklow. Grew up half an hour's drive from here in Rathdrum, County Wicklow. Famous for Avondale and the home of Charles Sir Parnell, who was obviously known as the uncrowned King of Ireland. So I've been in the whisky industry over 20 years, and for the past 2 years been happily working in my own home county here in County Wicklow and helping Powerscourt get established.
I bet you 20 years ago you didn't think you'd be doing that.
No, 20 years ago, obviously the industry is very, very different than it is today. 20 years ago there were 3 Irish whisky distilleries, soon to be 4. But the 4th was the re-establishment of one of the oldest, which of course was Kilbeggan. But 20 years ago there was only Middleton Distillery down in County Cork, there was the Bushmills Distillery in County Antrim, and the Cooley Distillery in County Louth, and they were the 3 distilleries. And Irish whisky was in a very different place 20 years ago. It was declining sales worldwide. Things weren't doing too great for it, and then all of a sudden things changed, and things changed due to a lot of different reasons, but there's a lot of focus.
Is there any one particular reason or any one particular catalyst?
The catalyst is when Pernod Ricard got involved and started focusing on Irish whiskey and decided to focus on one particular brand, that being Jameson, worldwide. That certainly was the starting point. But secondly, a very simple thing: Irish whiskey tastes good. It's different to other styles of whiskey. It's got a lighter, softer, almost sweeter appeal than, we'll say, traditional Scotch whiskey or other styles. And people's taste buds have changed with time as well. And people now in their 40s, probably the first generation when growing up, where the choice of drink was more than just water or milk. There was probably sweet drinks, and as a result, as they graduated into drinking alcohol, they probably had a sweet tooth that they didn't realise. And certainly Irish whiskey appeals to that rather than Scotch whiskey. Look, globally you see growth of bourbon whiskey as well, and bourbon whiskey is inherently more sweet than some other styles of whiskey. So that's got something to do with it. And then as well, I suppose, brand Ireland, and Ireland becoming a cool thing through music, through pubs, through films, through theatre, through dance. People focusing on Ireland and seeing what else is out there. There's a bit more to Ireland than just a glass of a dark beer with a white head, and seeing that there was, what's this whiskey? I'll try that. Oh, that's nice because I like sweeter things. That's better than, what my parents drank in the 70s. So, a lot of these things, like a perfect storm of things, came together and helped the Irish industry. But, the boring start of it is you needed a large multinational to start focusing on the category.
Yeah, and that's what they were. So 20 years in the industry, obviously you've seen it change in that time, and you're here at Powerscourt since...
Yeah, Powerscourt, I've been here officially since the beginning of this year, 2022, but unofficially since around Easter the previous year. I was doing some consultancy work with Parascourt. I'm very friendly with Noel Sweeney, worked with Noel for years in Cooley Distillery. Noel was the master distiller and master blender here. Then Alex Pierce, who was the then CEO of the company, I'm friendly with him. So they'd asked me to come on board to help out with just some of my experience and my knowledge from previously 18 years working in internationally for Irish whiskey and other whiskey brands. Came on board April of last year, and then in January of this year, Noel Sweeney left the business, and I took on a new role as head of whiskey, which was essentially, everything to do with releasing products and new product development and putting strategy and systems in place to that we would have a portfolio of products into the future in this transitional period when the initial liquids that were purchased 4 years ago are being reduced. We just don't have as much of it, and we're beginning to start releasing our own whiskies. And put a bit of strategy in place of how we achieve that. So that's what I've been doing now for the past where are we now? September, 9 months.
Yeah, structure is always a good thing.
It is, especially
as you grow.
Yes,
and obviously that's the plan here is to grow.
Definitely.
Open since the first distillation here was.
First distillation was 2018. So the idea of the distillery came about around 2014, 2015, when some local families from the area had an idea of maybe establishing a whiskey distillery in County Wicklow. Looking through history books, and we don't have any records of any legal whiskey distilleries in County Wicklow. I think it's probably because of the proximity to Dublin, and Dublin being such a hotbed of whiskey distillation in the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries. So the two families came together and sort of putting a plan about establishing a distillery, and obviously trying to raise funds is a big issue, and then more importantly trying to find a good location. And they came here, the two families all grew up around this area, so they came to the Slasinger family who owned the Parascourt estate with the business plan, and the Slasingers bought into it and went, actually this could be a good idea for our estate. So where we're seated right now was chosen as the site, and this is the mill house, and this is the oldest building on the entire estate from the 18th century, and this would have been where all the barley and all the grain and all the cereals were brought, and they were milled down into flour. In later years it became a sawmill.
Okay.
So this was chosen as the site. And then they had to go start sourcing money and getting knowledge and know-how, and that's when Noel Sweeney got involved, and the Pierce family. And the Pierce family owned the our founders of the Isle of Arran distillery in Scotland, Irish family, but involved with Scottish whiskey. They brought whiskey knowledge. You had Noel then bringing distillation knowledge and blending knowledge, and also access to liquid that he'd previously distilled in Cooley Distillery. So that was purchased, and in September 2017. They started construction of the distillery, which backs onto this old part of the building. And then in June 2018, first distillation happened. So it was a 9-month turnaround, which at that stage was the quickest turnaround for Forsyths of Scotland, who were the famous engineering company in distilling circles. So started distilling in June 2018. First liquid was laid down in August 2018. They just didn't have all the barrels in place yet, so liquid was kept in storage in IBCs and then put into casks in August 2018. So that means our oldest liquid is now just over 4 years of age.
So it's whiskey?
It's whiskey, yeah. It only needs to be 3 years. I tasted about 3 years. Thought it needed a little bit more time. So we held on another year, and that's what we are now beginning to slowly release, is some of our own liquid, because as I've said a few times, what we purchased originally is getting smaller and smaller. We're running out of certain ages and certain categories, so we need to start supplementing with our own liquid. So we have almost 750,000 litres of pure alcohol of that we've produced ourselves, which would be enough for 2-3 million bottles right now, and we're still reducing on a daily basis, 5 days a week.
Great.
Producing the equivalent of maybe 8 barrels of whiskey a day. That's with one shift. We've capacity to treble that if we so require that, and we're looking maybe next year to double our capacity. And
Great.
With hopefully the expectations and the plans that we have for products like Fercullen Falls and other products that we're going to bring over the next few years, hopefully we'll be doubling if not trebling our capacity.
Well, obviously in a few minutes we'll get to actually have a sample of your favourite Irish, which is currently Fercullen Falls. Obviously, something you're proud of here.
Yeah.
I'm suspecting you were involved in the final blend.
Pretty much all aspects of it.
Okay. So it's got a little bit of your fingerprints.
Yeah, no, we are very good. I head up our new product development team here, so we real collaborative effort to bring this to life. But my favourite part of it certainly was playing around with different blends and different ideas and different samples and coming up with the concept. So it was good.
And obviously, so I've known of Parascort obviously living out in California, and the folks came out in I think it was 2019 or so, and they brought out a bottle of I think it was the 8-year-old, and I was chuffed to hear of a distillery just down the road from Kiltiernan. But that was obviously bought liquid. I'm delighted for you guys, and I'm sure you are, that you're now actually putting your own distillate into the bottle. Yeah,
so Fercullen Falls is our first release. Now it's not 100% our own liquid because it's a blend. So we have had to source some grain whiskey for this blend, but specifically for the blend. By Q1 next year, we should be in a position to release a single malt whiskey from Parascort.
Just from here.
Fercullen single malt, which will be 100% distilled here on site in County Wicklow.
Great.
And then as time evolves, we have more distillates that are maturing. Like we have pot still whiskey, we have peated malt, we have rye-based pot stills. We have a lot of different mash bills that are presently maturing. So with time, we'll start releasing those. But ultimately, where I'd like us to be in the next few years is to have an established blended whiskey, an established malt whiskey, and then have pot still and these. Maybe loath to use the term experimental, but maybe heritage mash bills.
I was just going to ask you that.
Whiskies, yeah.
I've not met Fionn O'Connor, but I know he has done a huge amount of work as part of his PhD. And I think it's fair to say people like yourself within the industry are excited by the fact that we can look back 100, 150, 200 years and actually use that in our distilling future.
Yeah, one of the things I used to always say in my previous role when I was working with Beam Suntory, I brought the Kilbeggan pot still and Kilbeggan small batch rye to life, and I used to always maintain that you innovate through heritage and you innovate through history. So you look at when Irish whiskey dominated the world, it dominated the world for a specific reason. The whiskey was really high quality, and the heritage mash bills that were back then are very different to the Irish mash bills of today. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're actually looking to when Irish whiskey was number one in the world, taking those examples, taking those mash bills and trying to bring them back to life. And that involved, pot still, malted, unmalted barley, but also use of other cereals as well, be it oats, rye, wheat, any of those types of things, and then different percentages of it.
Of course,
it's just, for a long period of time, there was only one Irish whiskey company making pot still whiskey, and they made it their particular recipes, and so that became the norm. And whereas Irish whiskey was so much more diverse 100 years ago, and that's one of the things that within the Irish Whiskey Association that I work very closely with and have chaired some of the committees over the years, that it's the depth and diversity of Irish whiskey is what we're trying to get across to people. Your average consumer out in market, be it in California, Chicago or Shanghai, they might think, Irish whiskey is, they'll use all those adjectives like light, soft, mild, mellow, easy drinking, smooth, all of these adjectives, which yes, are there. You can attribute them to Irish whiskey, but Irish whiskey is so much more diverse. You take a Connemara, a 12-year-old, and say, is that the same as a Fercullen 10-year-old single grain? Well, they're both Irish whiskies, but they're very, very different Irish whiskies, and that depth and diversity is really what stands Irish whiskey apart from lots of others, and that's something that here in Parascort we've been focusing on and producing different styles of whiskey. Look, the blends are always going to be what pays the bills. That may be a single malt. But we can have fun with some of the other stuff, and that's what stands us apart. Yeah,
just about to say, I know recently from seeing the work you guys do and how you launched your the second of your Italian garden
Yeah,
series, was it?
yeah,
I actually, having some connection to
Yes.
this place from my past, knowing
Yeah.
of the gardens, having seen them in a few films and movies over the years, I think it's lovely that you've taken that Italian garden heritage and added some Italian wine barrels to finish it.
Yeah, that was kind of one of my first one of the first releases I did when I went back in January. After Noel Sweeney left, and I sat down for my first MPD meeting, and the team sort of say, okay, our estate series number 1 last year, which was a single grain finished in Amarone, which was Noel decided on that because he loves grain whiskey and Amarone's his favourite red wine.
Okay.
So that's what he did, and then back in January they said, okay, John, what are you doing for the second release? And I'm like, oh God, I'm following Noel Sweeney. So
the bar is high.
Yeah, so I decided to do something completely different, and I went for a blend. And but I also wanted to acknowledge, Noel is a good friend of mine, and I've worked with Noel for like over 16 years, and it was a case of I wanted to tip of the hat to Noel, Amarone being his favourite wine style, so let's continue that Amarone influence. So I took some aged malts, 20-year-old single malt whiskey that had finished for 4 years in Amarone, and blended it with 11-year-old grain whiskey. At a percentage where I was really happy with the mouthfeel, because I wanted people to be able to get the Amarone influence, but also get the sweetness of the grain whiskey as well. And then when you actually consume it, it combines a lovely mouthfeel. You get all of these elements together, and then. Being the estate series, we focus on a different element on the estate, and there are so many different things from, the waterfall to the house to, the mill house was our first one, which is the building we're in now. But because this was Italian, I called it an Amarone influence, so Italian influence, because it's not a finish. It was like, let's use the Italian gardens, which,
of course,
the famous terrace gardens in front of the house, voted third most beautiful gardens in the world by National Geographic.
Really?
So focus on that, and it's been great. It's been a really, really good success. It was, I think we limited 6,000 bottles, and it's doing really, really well for us.
So you did a launch at a famed Italian restaurant in
Dublin. Yeah, we had a great night. It was daytime. It was actually my birthday as well, which was just a bizarre coincidence. June the 20th this year we launched it. So we had a great afternoon drinking whiskey and eating Italian tapas, whatever. I know that's 2 different languages in there, but whatever the Italian for tapas is, small bites.
Antipasti, is it?
Antipasti, that was a great.
And obviously we're going to taste the Fercullen Falls in a minute. Obviously we're recording this as opposed to doing video, but a very different look and feel to the bottle. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I strive to achieve when I started discussing the transition from purchased aged liquid to our own produced liquid is it needs to be visually different. It's going to be different liquid. It's going to be younger liquid than what we've had. It's going to taste differently because it's made in a different location. So there's no point in trying to shoehorn new liquid into old look labels or old look brands or names. Well, Fercullen is our brand name. That is the old name for this region. It was Fercullen, literally meaning the men of the Wicklow Mountains. So that is our brand name. But heretofore we've had like Fercullen Premium Blend and Fercullen 8-year-old. This is a blend as well, but we looked at another almost like a sub-brand, and Powerscourt is famous for the houses, famous for the gardens, and it's famous for the waterfalls. So let's have Fercullen Falls as a name. Have the label very much more contemporary, different look and feel to our traditional labels, which with age statements on them have the look of maybe traditional Scotch malts or traditional old Irish brands. So have this one that it will it'll really pop, it'll stand out. You look at it and you're kind of like, wow, that looks new and interesting and exciting. And the liquid, of course, it's new, interesting, exciting liquid, and that was the concept behind it. So and obviously none of us have a crystal ball, although you are the new product development guy here. will Fercullen Falls become a sub-brand, so to speak, as you look forward?
Well, Fercullen will always be our the name of the whiskey that we're releasing. So Fercullen Falls is our blended whiskey. Next year we'll have a Fercullen single malt, we'll have a Fercullen single pot still. Whether they'll have subsection names up for discussion now, but I doubt it. I think we'll probably just have Fercullen single malt, you know. Whereas this one, we just wanted to, you know, something that I think it works. I think Fercullen Falls sounds good, and you can. I could envisage people going into a bar and there's Fercullen 10 or Fercullen 21 or Fercullen whatever, and saying, yeah, I'll have the Falls, please. You know, yeah. Fercullen Falls, and I think you can play with the word as well. You can, you know. Ginger and Falls, you know, things like that. You can play around with,
yeah,
you know, so yes, our brand name is Fercullen. All our releases will be Fercullen, but certainly this one, as a starting point, as Fercullen Falls, is a new
and sells at
€38 on shelf here in Ireland. So pretty good price for a lot of the new releases, and you know the reason we can do that is. The makeup of it is I specifically went for a much higher malt content than your average Irish whiskey. Your average Irish whiskey is probably anywhere between 10 to 20% malt. We've gone for 50% malt.
Okay, so
I wanted the spice, I wanted the intensity, I wanted the creaminess of the malt to be really, really evident. Also, the malt, we've made it ourselves, you know, so there's a certain cost implication to that. And then the other 50% is grain whiskey. I love grain whiskey. This is sourced grain whiskey, but what I've done with it is I've chosen two different styles of grain whiskey. Straight bourbon matured grain whiskey, but then also grain whiskey that has matured in heavy char new American oak barrels to give a depth of colour, intensity of that sort of burnt sugars and the caramels and all those elements that you'll get from freshly charred barrels. So that combination with our malt whiskey, which has matured in first fill ex-bourbon barrels, you're going to get vanillas, you're going to get the sort of citrus, green fruit elements. There's a lovely spice to this. There's a pepper spice, there's a clove spice, touch of cinnamon. All of these elements together, but ultimately, for me, it's that combination. It's the mouthfeel. It's a good whiskey for me has to have a good aroma and a good mouthfeel, and that has to work together. And this, I feel, does for something that is essentially going to be our entry-level product.
This is my next question. This is going to be your calling card.
Yeah, essentially, you know, and at €38 a bottle here in Ireland, it's at a very good price point.
You're in that just next level up.
Yeah, next level up. We can never go at a price point like a Kilbeg and a Jameson, a Paddy, a Barrows or a Bushmills. Economies of scale, it's impossible.
Yeah.
You know, but at the next level where you have the likes of Teeling Small Batch, you have ourselves, maybe Jameson Black Barrel, some of the next step seen as maybe a little bit more premium. That's where we're sitting, and we're price competitive against all of those.
And in some ways, you can't do it because of economies of scale, but you're better off being in that area because you're never going to take any of Jameson's market share. So being in that, I'm not sure how it's categorized in terms of the price structure, but it makes sense that's where you're pitching yourself.
Yeah, it also does because you have. I often use the United States as an example, and the absolute success of Jameson in the US over the years, whereby they were very good at targeting the young consumer, the 21-year-old kid who's drinking whiskey, having a shot in a bar, whatever, and they're on Jameson. Now that kid gets to 25 or 26, and they have a few dollars in their pocket, they've got a good job, and they're looking around. They like Jameson, and they like that style, they like that flavour. But now their kid brother or sister at 21 years of age is shooting Jameson in the bar. And they're going, well, I'm not exactly going to drink the same thing as the student, So what's there for me? Where's the next step?
Yeah.
And that next step up is where Fercullen Falls will really fit in, It's a versatile drink. It's great for drinking straight, as we will in a few seconds. But also it works really well in a cocktail because of that mouthfeel, because of the extra malt content. Also, we decided to bottle it at 43%. So again, it gives a bartender a little bit more leeway to play around with flavours. It holds up better in maybe an Irish coffee, for example.
Okay.
Irish coffee has the third largest penetration of cocktail in the United States, after margarita and old fashioned, is it? I can't remember. But Irish coffee comes in third, and something like this, you'll taste the whiskey in it. because of that extra malt content and that extra alcohol, that up to 43%. So all of that combined is where we're sitting with this whiskey.
So I've noticed on my journey into whiskey, Irish whiskey, ABVs are, this is at 43. I'm noticing more of them in that 43 to 47 range.
Yeah.
Is that to do with filtration?
It can be. When it's at 46%, you don't necessarily have to chill filtrate it because the extra alcohol means that the oils don't separate. Okay. So often you'll see if it's 46, they'll also in marking say non-chill filtered. Now this has been chill filtered. It's 43 because if it goes into the cold, it could separate because it's not, the alcohol isn't high enough. But at 43, it was just, it worked. I'm all about, when I said that nose, that mouth feel and strength. I like, a classic example was there back around St. Patrick's Day. I launched a single cask product, which I'd done in conjunction with a local brewery. They'd got a loan of some of our barrels. I put Imperial Stout into it. They released Imperial Stout. I got the barrels back and put whiskey into it. And then I was looking to release it as an exclusive here in the distillery. And I went through different. It was a single cask, so I wasn't blending. But I was trying to get the right strength of where I was happy. And at 40, it was just lost. It was all nose, there was no mouthfeel, there was no body, there was no oil, there was no texture. A cask strength, it was too intense, it was too sharp, there was no nose. All you could get was smell alcohol, you tasted it, was burning. And I went through all the different things and I hit 49%, was perfect. You had a really good aroma, really good nose, you had a great mouthfeel. So that for me, for that one product, it was 49% was when it was at its, for me, I was happiest with it, and that's what I released. Yeah. And with this blend, 43% was for us, because unfortunately also we have to be cognizant of Ireland has the third highest spirits excise rates in Europe. So, we go higher, it's going to be more expensive on the shelf. As well. So we need to keep that into mind as well. And 43, we could, we could get away with €38 on the shelf.
Yeah, I sense some pride from you about this whiskey, which is
definitely. It was a labour of love over the past 9 months. It was a big effort from the entire team here. At a time where costs of goods are increasing across the board, when logistics are a problem. Like the analogy of the swan, everything looked graceful. You mightn't have thought anything was wrong if you saw me from day to day, but underneath, as a team, we were absolutely, our legs were kicking to get this on time.
And of course, you were dealing with we're still in it, but the tail-ish end of COVID as well.
There was that. Yeah, there was that. But literally, labels arrived 2 days before bottling. It was down to the wire. The capsules on the top here, these, were lost somewhere in customs, and we then had to find them. And again, they just arrived a few days beforehand. We thought it was even at the stage we were almost considering pushing it out by a month so we'd be comfortable. And then it was like, no, it's gonna come, and it did. But it was pretty chaotic few months.
So we should probably get some of this into a glass, and I'm going to go off on a tangent and kind of dig into you a little. And do you remember what your first whiskey was? And
I do. Well, the first, apart from, you might tip your finger into something your grandfather had, he was my grandfather, who I remember was one of my grandfathers, died before I was born. But one of my grandfather, Johnson, a Wicklow farmer, he was a Powers man, so that probably was the first I ever would have tasted. There was never whiskey in my house when I was growing up. Where we grew. My parents didn't drink. Oh, no, that's a lie. My mother drank paddy, but I don't recall it much being in the house. But I remember when I got to sort of experimental years with alcohol in my obviously late teens. No earlier than that.
Your secret safe in the world.
It was Crested 10 was my first whiskey that I really recall, and that I remember having an effect. And I remember a friend telling me about it, saying, try this whiskey called Crested 10. And I remember the way he described it. He said, you'll drink it and it'll go down, and then the heat will come back at you. and I remember trying it, and that's exactly my experience of it. And to this day, it's one of my favourite Irish whiskies. And you know, I'm also a judge for international wine spirits competition and many different competitions around the world. And if I was to look at that whiskey objectively, it's not going to win too many prizes, you know. But it's still one of my favourites because it was my first whiskey, you know. And I was still, now they've changed it now. It's no longer called Cresta 10. Jameson are rebranded as just Crested. But I still, if I see an old bottle of the original sort of yellow label Cresta 10,
I remember too.
Yeah,
it had the red, it was a red insignia or ship. I think.
Yeah, it was a ship. Yeah, and that I'll if I see it at a local bar or you know just a country bar, I'll generally get a glass of it.
It's only available here in Ireland.
It is.
Yeah. So I'm thinking when we leave, we'll be grabbing a bottle in duty free, but we can't get it stateside.
No, and it was. Here's trivia for you. It was the first Irish whiskey brand to be bottled in house. I think Cresta 10 was.
As opposed to being done by
a bonder or bottler or something like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
Staunch it. Yeah. So this is Fercullen Falls. So Fercullen Falls is a blend. High malt content, 50% malt, 50% grain. The malt is matured exclusively in first fill bourbon barrels. The grain a combination of first fill bourbon and, as I said, heavy char oak. On the nose, there is that kind of orchard fruits in the background, stewed apples, things like that. But there's a lot of that burnt sugars, honeys, sweet caramel flavours coming through, and that's the influence of the first fill bourbon, but also more importantly the influence of the heavy char fresh oak barrels. You're going to have those burnt sugars in the oak are going to be there, and you put the liquid into it, it's just going to absorb it straight away. So
there's definitely you mentioned spice earlier on when you were describing it. There's definitely that spice character.
There's a cinnamon spice.
Yeah, it's a sweet spice. I would call that a sweet spice.
There is. And then,
it's a very attractive nose.
It's a whiskey that, if you keep it at the front of your mouth, you don't actually taste anything because all your sweet receptors are further back in your tongue. So it waits until it has to go back over your tongue before you pick up all the flavours. And then, you know, the maltiness is there, so you got this kind of creaminess in your mouth. It's kind of layers of oils and cream, and that's that higher malt content coming through. Got the sweetness and the saltness in the finish of the grain whiskey, that sweet grain element coming through, and drying again the side of your mouth, and that's that heavy char bourbon. So the tannins in that are kicking in there. So you know it's a simple whiskey, but you know it's fairly complex, you know, and it's lovely drinking straight as is, but as I said, we have different drink suggestions. We're working with different mixologists and bartenders coming up with ideas of different long drinks, and I said certainly in a hot toddy or an Irish coffee, this will work pretty good.
It's obviously first time I've tasted it here. It definitely leaves that lovely long.
Yeah, for a 4-year-old whiskey, it's a really long length. Long length. Yeah, you know what I mean. No, it definitely does have good length for such a young whiskey, and certainly in our experimentation and trying it against the products at the same price point and stuff like that, really stood up. And you know, it's just that extra malt is giving more depth of flavour. It's giving more of a mouth feel. It's giving that heavier cream feel. It's like the difference if you took a single cream or a double cream and you took a spoonful of each. Double cream has more of a mouth feel. This has more of a mouth feel than other whiskies at its sort of in its competitive set.
It's interesting as well. I'm just going back to the nose. When I've nosed and tasted grain whiskies, I find a nutty character to them, almost a kind of so take almonds, but actually blend them up like an almond butter, so to speak. And there is a kind of a little hint of it in there that I'm getting on it. But to your point, the spice Spice is lovely.
Yeah.
Not overpowering.
No.
Nicely balanced in the mouth, and I can see how this would actually make great for sipping. But I think it's going to be good in cocktails. It's got character. It's got weight and body to it. So.
And that second sip now, just had it's all that sort of heavy cream in the background. It's real it's just a mouthfeel. I love the mouthfeel of this whiskey. There's no lightness, there's no thinness in it. It's a heavier mouthfeel, almost getting towards an oily pot still, but without the spice of that. One of those real old traditional Irish pot stills with the real heavy mouthfeel. This is getting towards that, and that's just our malt, the influence of our malt
and
kicking in.
Going back to that part of production, the grains, the malt, the barley is it coming from?
Close by. We do have barley fields here on the estate, and we do use some of the barley, but more so in our pot still whiskey. So unmalted barley. So our malted barley is all sourced from. We try to get it from County Wicklow. If it's not, it's certainly within the region. Be it it's from Leinster somewhere. We'll use local grain companies to source for us and things like that. So.
How was harvest this year?
Yeah, good. Yeah, we got a lot. It was early. It was about a week earlier than usual because we had a very good summer. And that has been it was collected. When was it? Was it back in? Was that just before my holidays or back from holidays? I can't actually remember. I think it might have been just beginning of August.
Okay.
So we were happy. We were happy with what we got. Now, obviously, just like everything, next year, price of malt has increased significantly. It's nearly trebled now than what it was maybe a year and a half ago. So that's going to be a bit of a issue for most people, and costs are going to increase. Unfortunately,
everything else.
Yeah, unfortunately. So.
And plans in the future. I know again we can't. We don't have the crystal ball, but from what I've read, and we're going to see Fercullen Falls in across the pond at some stage.
Hopefully, we're early negotiations with a few different companies. We're very unlike a lot of Irish whiskey companies who, when they start up, to go have to get to the US. Well, look, I spent 10 years literally walking from one side of the US to the other, selling whiskey, and it's not as easy as I've got a listing in the US, now we can sit back. Each state is different. Each state is like a different country within Europe. So you need to approach it differently. So we deliberately didn't target the US, and we're still not in the US. Yet we're in 20 odd other countries around the world, and growing quickly. And we kind of started off in the good whiskey malt countries, the likes of France, Germany, the Benelux countries, some of the Nordics. We're in China. We're going into Southeast Asia. South Korea is a big market for us. Israel is a very good market. It's a very good malt market. So we kind of build the base, learn from that, and then take that into the US. We also didn't quite have the portfolio for the US. The US, you needed a product like Falls. We didn't have a product like Falls. But this will enable us now, there will be interest because we have this product, and that then enables us to bring some of our older Fercullen products in as well. So, within the next 6 months, not only am I going to bring out an exclusive Fercullen single malt distilled here, but I'm also working on a new 15-year-old product. I have a new 21-year-old product coming out just in a matter of weeks. The 21-year-old product has come from an influence that I lived in Spain for a while, and I love going to Spain. I go to Spain twice a year at least. And I just love going into old Spanish bodegas where they have the barrels behind the bar, and they'll get the fortified wines out of those barrels. And so that was in my head when I was coming up with the concept for the 21. So I've taken bourbon matured whiskies and then PX matured whiskies and Oloroso matured whiskies and married those together in the 21-year-old. So interesting. I've enough stock for at least 5 years of that, which I'm looking forward to, and the same with the 15. So I still have some of our aged whiskies, but our 10 will be transitioning out, our 8 will be transitioning out, our 18 will be transitioning out. So this time next year, if we were sitting down, what I would hope to see from us is Fercullen Falls, Fercullen Single Malt, Fercullen 15, Fercullen 21. and then maybe interesting single cask releases, market specific or distillery specific.
Okay, great. No, it's obviously, again, I can tell you're excited about what you're working on, and there's a structure and a strategy as you move forward. So I certainly know from the whiskey groups and circles that I'm in the States, Fercullen is talked about. People smuggle it in their suitcases or in boxes, and so I'm sure when it arrives officially, it'll be well received. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up, when you're not here and not at home, is there a great whiskey bar in Wicklow, or do you go into Dublin, or where would you go?
My local pub is the Cartoon Inn in Rathdrum. That's my local, which is it's famous. Rathdrum used to have a cartoon festival, illustrating cartoons. So a lot of famous cartoonists over the years would have come to Rathdrum, and this pub, instead of the walls were all painted white, and there's cartoons literally drawn all over the walls. So it's all cartoons, illustrations, things like that, and that's my local. But the Palace Bar would be where I would go to in the city, and then outside of that, some of my favourite bars. One of my all-time favourite bars, and the inspiration for the 21 is a bar called Antigua Casa de la Guardia, which is in Malaga. In Andalusia, and that's a traditional Spanish sort of fortified wine bar, and that's where I first kind of had the idea for the 21-year-olds when I was in that bar drinking fortified wines.
Inspiration in wine country.
Yeah. So they would be, they're my locals.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear and feel the passion for Fercullen here, and looking forward to some more great things coming out of the local distillery.
Yeah, exactly. Your local distillery. Yeah, it's nice to be able to say that.
Yeah, and I know that back in the spring you mentioned your stout cask finish. They actually came down and picked up a bottle.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, fair play.
So I have a bottle of that at home, which I haven't opened. It'll go back stateside, and I look forward to sharing that with some friends over there. So we should say sláinte. We'll wrap this up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sláinte, and thanks again.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. You'll find more episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll find the My Favourite Irish video series at irishwhiskeylad.com. That's Irish whiskey with an E, LAD.com. Until next time, sláinte.